there. Not gonna lie, today is a very, very weird news day, and there is a ton of news to get to. Hunter Biden's plea deal falling apart, Kevin Spacey being acquitted of sexual assault, and a lot more. And we're gonna get into all of it. But first, we've got to talk about what was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen on Capitol Hill, and that was lawmakers, both Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and progressives, listening closely and having a very sober conversation about crashed UFO, alien craft, and dead aliens inside the halls of Congress. So listen close, because they're using different words, but that's exactly what they're talking about here.
You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Biologics. Now, if you're a believer, you're probably about to scream, "I told you so" to a bunch of people right now. And if you're a skeptic, the first question you probably have right now is, who is that guy? Well, he's former intelligence analyst David Grush. He's a man with some of the highest level top secret clearances, telling the White House Oversight Subcommittee under oath that he uncovered an alleged government cover-up of an alien crash retrieval program going back decades, and he took what he found to the Inspector General. And Grush has a pretty impressive resume. He worked for the Air Force and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the UAP Task Force, and the Pentagon's newly established All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. And that's when he said he started to interview people within the government who told them that the U.S. has recovered what they call unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomenon. And they told lawmakers this.
Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured, and the activity. And I got
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology?
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered that you would think, that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Okay. All right. So verifiable or not, this is all now part of the official congressional record. It is a lot to process. Let's also note, anytime he was asked for specifics, he said he could only provide them to members of Congress who have a security clearance, and would only do so inside something called the SCIF. That's basically a super secure compartmented room. And there were two decorated Navy pilots who were also a part of today's hearings. They testified about encountering UFOs that would jam their instruments and fly in ways that they couldn't explain.
If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change.
You're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
Okay, so that guy, David Fravor, two of those pilots, Ryan Graves, and in particular, the testimony of David Fravor, who was the commander of his entire squadron, has been pivotal in the modern-day UAP conversation. Them coming forward years ago and describing what they saw led us to where we are today. It also helped lead the Pentagon office to set up and take reports from pilots about what they've seen and to investigate it. But what about those claims of the crashed UFOs that we were just hearing about? NBC News has specifically asked the Pentagon if the DOD, not just AARO, that office, but the Department of Defense had any crashed non-human craft and non-human pilots. Here's what they said. To date, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. They also said, by law, AARO may receive all UAP information at all levels of classification, regardless of whether the original classification authority for such information is within the DoD or intelligence community. Again, attributing it all specifically to the new office, AARO. Lawmakers like Florida's Jared Moskowitz says they want the Pentagon to get way more specific.
We don't think those answers are sufficient. And in fact, we find them suspicious. Right? If this was just hokey, then why wouldn't they come out with an emphatic no?
A lot of Grush's claims are frankly otherworldly, like literally. Are you skeptical?
Well, I think we should all be skeptical. I think the point of being skeptical is to ask the questions. And that's really what this is about. This is about asking the right questions and getting the right information, right, and making it more transparent for the American people, right? This idea that the American people can't be trusted with this information, I don't accept.
And Jeremy Corbell is a documentary filmmaker who played a big role in bringing these questions to the public. If he looks familiar, that's because he was sitting behind Fravor, Grush, and Graves today in that testimony. Okay, Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us. I gotta say, though, man, pilots seeing weird stuff flying around in the sky is one thing, but someone coming along and basically saying what sounds like exactly all of the UFO crash conspiracies I've ever heard growing up, and then saying, I can only share details in a skiff with people who have clearance? Like, come on. What's your take on that?
Gadi, I think you know my take, which is that it wouldn't be shocking if you had been paying attention. Why David Grush can't say these things in public realms is because he's a whistleblower. He is exposing something that's been going on a long time. And I will tell you, I was there all day, days before, helped set this up. They wouldn't allow for a secure facility for him to speak just today. So you have to understand, it's only shocking if you haven't been paying attention. Today was a historic day, Gadi, and I think you understand why. We have never had people of this credential and credibility, not just saying they saw things with their eyes, but backed up by censored data. These aren't just pilots saying they saw something. These are pilots testifying to what's already known.
And one of the most bizarre parts of today is this back and forth where it was like, hey, I want to tell you more, but I can't. We'd have to go into the skiff and you'd have to have clearance. So what happens now? Grush says he's turned over a very specific list of names, hostile witnesses and cooperative witnesses, and specific locations, or a location where a craft may be or crafts may be. Like, what happens next, and how soon are we going to see some of these Congress people go into skiffs and get some of these possible briefings from Grush?
Yeah, so that is correct. So people have to understand that David Grush, so he came to George Knapp, my mentor in journalism, and me first. He came because of reprisal. He came because he was fearful because of this reprisal. We took a lot of time and vetted him. He came forward to the world. He is a true whistleblower, a patriot. He is doing this because it is the right thing to do. It's what he was taught to do. Now, why he can't speak openly right there in the public congressional hearing is because he has an ICIG, which is an intelligence community inspector general complaint, a whistleblower complaint under the Presidential Protection Act. This is literally, the world is watching David Grush right now. How we handle David Grush's account, what he saw, what he knows, is how everybody else who is willing to break from the fold and tell the truth to the American public about the presence of UAP or UFO, which is fact, it is true, it is real. But how you get these people to come forward is how we treat David Grush right now. Let's investigate his claims like the Inspector General did, and by the way, found it credible and urgent what he said. So they found his claims through their own investigation to be credible and urgent. David Grush is telling you how it is, whether or not you can accept it.
If 10, 15 years ago you would have said, like, what are the chances of us hearing this in Congress, it would have been slim to none. I ask you this. What do you think the chances are today that Grush believes what other people have told him, but that he's been fed lies and misinformation and some sort of psyops?
You know, I can understand that perspective from watching it through television. Honestly, I'm just glad you are covering this, Gadi, because this is news, and your network is covering it because it is news. And sure, what yesterday could have been, we can say, hey, this is unusual to understand today. But those people attacking David Grush and his credibility, this is your time to do your worst. Everything has failed. He is absolutely who he says he is, and I can't wait for him to be able to tell his full story publicly to everybody, because the American public, they don't only have a right to know, Gadi, they have a need to know, because the implications of what he's saying, if they are true, which they are true, Gadi, but everybody should make that determination on their own. This is not somebody that's coming forward as some sort of shill for an intelligence agency. He is going against the grain here. He is trying to be a patriotic American, and you know what? He's succeeding, and it's pretty incredible to watch.
One of the things we heard about today was pictures and video and sensor data. And you had at least one member of Congress saying that he had seen a picture of something that he just couldn't explain. And then we've heard talk about classification and what shouldn't be classified. Do you know of pictures and imagery that would just stop everybody in their tracks if it was released today?
I think you are highly aware that I know of these because I've obtained and released a lot of them with George Knapp. However, I know that there is more coming, and I really hope for ultimate transparency. Look, when you have AOC on one side and you have Representative Tim Burchett on the other, and they are agreeing on a topic that everybody can get behind, it gives me hope. This gives me hope that we can unite and get together on things, even if we disagree. Let's find out the truth. And we are now at a critical moment, a critical point where the right questions are being asked by the right people. And let me tell you, it's a pressure cooker. The meetings I've had today, what's going on here in D.C., and where this is going, I think that there is nothing now that can stop whatever the truth is, whatever UFOs, UAP, represent to humanity, which I don't know the ultimate answer, but whatever it is, we're going to learn more, and that is encouraging.
It's crazy to think that this is what it took to remind us all that we're all human. Last question. Do you know of any specific times, or does it look like he will be going into a skiff with members of Congress anytime soon? David Grush.
I would have to imagine that the answer to that would be extremely soon. However, that's not just the end goal. You have to understand, just educating Congress that they've been lied to, that there's been misappropriation of funds, which is theft. Okay, just letting them know that is not enough. Telling them this is not enough. We need active participation in exposing this information and being honest with the American public who deserves the truth but has a need to know what UFOs or UAP, what it means to us that these are real, which is undoubted. There are machines of unknown origin, and this is a matter of strategic surprise from a national security issue. We cannot have something happen where we don't have a 360 view. But, Gadi, I'll tell you this, man. It is so far beyond just national security and strategic surprise. If this is correct, then this changes the fabric of our understanding of what it means to be human. And I, myself, am encouraged that we're going to learn more extremely soon, not just through bureaucrats, not just through the legal system, but there are other ways in which people get truth out, and I'm excited for that.
I'm glad you're encouraged. I'm glad you're excited. I am frustrated because it seems like the truth is out there. It's just inside of a skiff that I don't have.
No, Gadi, it's inches closer every day. You've been on this beat. You've been on this beat, and you know it is inches closer every day. We're learning more factual information every day. To have Commander Fravor and Lieutenant Graves up there today telling you these facts, what they experienced, that is a huge leap forward. You've never seen it before in your life, and you're going to see more of it.
Yeah, at this point, I don't care what it is. I just want answers. Jeremy Corbell, you have been so instrumental in all of this. Thanks so much, brother.
Thank you.
And lots of drama going down inside of a Delaware courtroom today where the president's son, Hunter Biden, was all set to finalize a plea deal until it collapsed. Now, Hunter Biden had a deal with the Justice Department to avoid a felony gun charge in exchange for pleading guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges. But then that deal fell apart over immunity from future charges. So today ended with Hunter Biden pleading not guilty to tax charges because essentially not everyone in the courtroom was on the same page. NBC Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now. Ryan, what happened? How did this go off the rails? And does this mean that Hunter Biden is still under investigation?
Well, the answer to your question, Gadi, is yes, but that actually has nothing to do with the plea arrangement breaking down today. What we found out today is that there was a lot of concerns that the judge had about this arrangement that was worked out between prosecutors and the Biden legal team. In particular, she didn't like a pretrial diversion program that the two sides had worked out, in part because it was going to make her the arbiter of whether or not Biden was complying with that diversion program. That's not normally the responsibility of a judge. But through this process, as she was pressing Hunter Biden himself, the prosecution, and the defense legal team, it was revealed that the scope of the plea arrangement and what ultimately would come from it was very narrow, that essentially would only absolve Biden of any type of crimes that occurred during a 5-year period and only on gun, tax, drug charges, and not basically a get-out-of-jail-free card going forward. And to that end, that led the judge to ask the prosecutor if Biden was still under investigation. The prosecutor said yes, but refused to say what he was under investigation for. So that means the political cloud surrounding Hunter Biden will continue.
The political cloud. I mean, there's a lot of nuance there, but there's also a lot of criticism going back weeks from when this was first announced. How much of this is a political hot potato, this plea agreement?
So I do think that the plea agreement itself is really a legal problem, and I do think that there is enough blame to go around between both the prosecution and the defense team that they did not kind of just make sure that this arrangement they had worked out would be okay with the judge ahead of time, and they found themselves in a bit of a quagmire once they got into the courtroom. The political problems are almost separate from that conversation, and the legal issues that were raised today are going to become a tool that Republicans use to continue to beat the drum that Hunter Biden is corrupt and that corruption extends to Joe Biden. Now, they haven't provided any concrete evidence to that end, but they often fill the void when there's a lack of information, like there was presented today when the judge asked the prosecutor what they could possibly still be investigating him over, and they could not respond. Well, Republicans are going to give a million different examples of what it could be, even if it's not. And that's the biggest problem for the Biden White House.
What's the reaction from President Biden in the White House?
You know, Gadi, they've been very careful to not involve themselves in this legal proceeding. Listen to what the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, said about this earlier today.
This case was handled independently, as all of you know, by the Justice Department under the leadership of a prosecutor appointed by the former president, President Trump. So for anything further, as you know, and we've been very consistent from here, I'd refer you to the Department of Justice and to Hunter's representatives.
So there's a twofold issue here. The first is that the Biden White House has been consistent in their belief that there should be a firewall between the White House and the Department of Justice, and that extends to the situation with former President Trump as well. They do not want to intermingle those relationships because of the political sensitivities involved. But there's also a personal family issue here. The president and Hunter have been very open about his struggles with addiction, his efforts to get sober and rebuild his life. And the president, instead of pushing him away because he may be a political liability, has brought him even closer. Republicans are seizing on that, but the White House is insistent that the president isn't going to change course as it relates to his son.
Ryan Nobles, thanks so much. And NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. Danny, how much of this centers around whether Biden was going to get immunity or not?
Well, whether or not he was going to get immunity, I mean, what happened today was really just a breakdown between the two parties, the two sides. And really the open question now is whether or not the government is serious that it really intends to continue investigating Hunter Biden. I don't think the government was guilty of being sneaky or trying to trick Biden into pleading guilty so that they could continue to investigate him. I really think this was just a breakdown in communication, a failure of both sides to come in and have every issue crystallized before you enter that plea agreement. You know, what happened today is unusual, but I have to tell you something. I view plea hearings as harrowing occasions. They normally go through without a hitch, but that doesn't mean a lot of things can't go wrong during them. The defendant may have a change of heart. The defendant may disagree with some of the facts that the judge puts on the record. There are a lot of things that can go wrong at a plea hearing. And in a very high-profile case with very unusual plea deal reached, in other words, pretrial diversion, and just the fact that these are misdemeanors that he's pleading guilty to, and it's in two different courts, magisterial court and also district court, there was bound to be some procedural issues here.
So procedurally, he pleaded not guilty today, and it seems like prison time is back on the table, possibly, right?
Yes and no, technically, understanding that procedurally, the judge really had to just take a plea. If she was going to continue the court date, it didn't make a lot of sense to do nothing today. Might as well. It's scheduled for an arraignment and a plea hearing. This was a combination hearing, don't forget. Arraignment plus plea hearing. And at an arraignment, what you do is you take a plea. So it just wouldn't make a lot of procedural sense for the judge to say, oh, let's just do nothing today. Everybody came in. It's scheduled for two things. We're going to do zero of them. Arguably, instead, they did at least one out of the two things that were scheduled today. They arraigned him. He took a guilty, or the court took a guilty or not guilty plea, excuse me. And then they can try and work it out. But at least something got done today, and the court did its job. I mean, if nobody else got their job done the right way, at least you can say the court did its job right.
Danny Savalos, always appreciate you putting it into context for us. Thanks so much, man. And Kevin Spacey has been found not guilty of sexual assault after a month-long trial in London. 9 sexual offense charges were brought by 4 different men who say Spacey assaulted them between 2001 and 2013. Shortly after the verdict, Spacey spoke to reporters.
I'm enormously grateful to the jury for having taken the time to examine all of the evidence and all of the facts carefully before they reach their decision. And I am humbled by the outcome today.
Now, this isn't the first time Spacey has faced these kinds of charges in court. Actor Anthony Rapp accused him of making sexual advances and then climbing on top of him when Rapp was just 14 years old. Spacey was found not liable in that civil trial, and NBC's Ali Arouzi has been following it all.
It's been a month-long, high-profile trial for Kevin Spacey here in London. And today, after 12 and a half hours of deliberation, the jury reached this verdict, and they found Kevin Spacey not guilty on all counts against him. On 7 counts of sexual assault, he was found not guilty. On 1 charge of causing somebody to engage in sexual activity without their consent, he was found not guilty. And arguably the most serious charge of causing somebody to engage in penetrative sex without their consent, he was found not guilty. That last charge could have been a life changer for Kevin Spacey, because he could have faced a maximum jail sentence of 19 years. But he was visibly relieved when the not guilty verdicts were read out 9 times. He cried in court. He looked at the jury, put his hand to his chest and mouthed "thank you" twice to them. Then he came out of the glass dock in the middle of the courtroom, still in tears, and he hugged his manager and his legal team. He then walked out of the courtroom to make a brief statement to the press, saying that he has a lot to process right now and that he feels very humbled. He was also very thankful for the jury for considering all of the evidence so closely and going through all of it throughout this 1-month trial. He then slipped out of the courtroom with his legal team into a London cab while people were shouting and cheering, one woman even shouting, "Happy birthday." Today marks the actor's 64th birthday. But now, what's next for Kevin Spacey? He gave an interview last month to a German newspaper saying that he is expecting to make a comeback. But that comeback will be determined by the court of public opinion.
Ali Aruzzi, thanks so much. And a bit of a touch-and-go moment at Capitol Hill today when Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell suddenly stopped talking mid-sentence during a weekly press conference. Take a look.
We're on a path to finishing the NDA this week. It's been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Are you good?
Okay, Mitch. Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to you?
Just over 10 minutes later, he returned to the mic there to finish taking questions. He said he was fine and ignored a question about who would succeed him as the leader of his conference. Back in March, he went to the hospital after falling in a D.C. hotel, breaking his ribs and suffering a concussion. He returned to work about a month later. And still to come, a scary scene in New York City today. A construction crane that was 45 stories high caught fire, then collapsed.
I thought it was another terrorist attack or something because there was a loud bang. It sounded like a bomb. It was pretty scary.
Hey there, thanks for sticking with us. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Rudy Giuliani conceded to making false claims about two 2020 Georgia election workers. The pair is suing him for baseless claims that they committed fraud. Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss say their lives were ruined when Giuliani claimed they were, quote, passing around USB ports like they were vials of heroin or cocaine. The two were actually passing a ginger mint. And Ron DeSantis' campaign has fired a staffer who retweeted and then deleted a Nazi symbol over the governor's face. The staffer, Nate Hochman, did not respond to a request for comment. The Ohio police officer who released a dog on an unarmed black man who had his hands in the air has been fired. That happened July 4th during a traffic stop. 23-year-old truck driver Jadarius Rose appeared to surrender before being mauled by that police dog. And the Fed has hiked interest rates again today by 1/4%. This is the 11th hike in just a year and a half. This is the highest rate level in 22 years, the same year Aerosmith and get this, NSYNC and Britney Spears performed during the Super Bowl halftime. Remember that? And Snoop Dogg just canceled concerts at the Hollywood Bowl. He says he's doing it in solidarity with actors and writers who were striking, bringing the film business to a standstill. The concerts were meant to celebrate the 30th anniversary of his debut album. And in New York, a shocking crane collapse in Midtown Manhattan this morning hurt at least 11 people, including 2 firefighters. Now, these videos posted to social media show when it happened. You see the top part of the crane collapse, hit a building across the street, then swing back to hit the building under construction. It all happened because of a fire that broke out in the engine of the crane. You can see right there, this video, smoke just billowing. And the mayor says it could have been a lot worse.
We had a fire on top of one of our cranes. Thank God that the injuries to 4 individuals were minor. As you see from the debris on the street, this could have been much worse.
Much, much worse. NBC's Rahima Ellis has more.
New developments in this area where the street has just been reopened from 41st to 42nd Street here in Midtown Manhattan, just a couple of blocks from Times Square. The building you see behind me wrapped in orange is the one that was under construction, and next to it you see the crane on top of this white scaffolding, and that's where the fire began. Authorities say, and you can see the pictures that are dramatic, it is amazing that there were not more injuries. We now know that there were 11, at least 11 people were injured. 9 of them are minor injuries. 2 are serious but not life-threatening. And authorities talk about what it was like when that fire happened, and we'll also hear from a witness who said what they heard. Take a listen.
Crane operator was operating the crane at that point and was lifting 16 tons of concrete. And that crane operator saw that the fire started and tried to extinguish it. So we give a lot of credit to the crane operator, but the fire overwhelmed that operator and had to exit the crane.
I thought it was another terrorist attack or something because there was a loud bang. It sounded like a bomb. It was pretty scary.
Again, authorities say it is amazing that there were not more people hurt. Many people in the area had to be evacuated from their homes and the surrounding buildings. And the investigation is going to be going on for some time to try and figure out why that fire started in the first place. Back to you.
Raheem Ellis, thanks so much. And heat waves are blanketing the Midwest, but that's not stopping a lot of people from doing what they want this summer. In Bremer County, Iowa, the fair is still going on despite the heat. Not only does the fair have to keep people safe and comfortable, they have to worry about those animals as well.
Last week of July, pretty typical. This is the weather we get. They take good care of their livestock and have them well prepared to be able to withstand the Iowa July heat.
And the annual bike ride from Sioux City to Davenport, Iowa is still going on, even in 90-degree heat.
And we went over our heat emergency protocols, made sure we had plenty of fluids, IV fluids, ready to go for anybody that needs them. We have plenty of ice packs, lots of fluids, lots of water.
And in Minnesota, the high temps are becoming a problem for farmers, even making hail bales spontaneously catch fire. NBC's Maggie Vespa is in St. Charles with more.
Gadi, the record-shattering heat wave that's been strangling parts of the Southwest for nearly a month at this point, a record 27 days and counting, has officially hit the Midwest and East Coast. Tonight, at last check, 125 million Americans are under some kind of heat alert across the country. We're talking from Phoenix to Philly and also cities like D.C., Boston, and New York. And here in the basically roasted Midwest, livelihoods are getting damaged by this heat. I want to show you, well, first, this field behind me. You can see this cornfield here in St. Charles, Minnesota. It's a couple hours outside Minneapolis. And let's show you now video of Seth Kaler, a fifth-generation Minnesota farmer, and his family walking through this cornfield. This is obviously theirs. And Kaler says by this time in the year, this close to harvest, the corn should be at his chest or higher. But you can see in the video, his 5-year-old son, Creed, is towering over a lot of these crops. Seth says in all of his years, he has never seen a drought this bad, a year this bad. He estimates that 30% of his crop will be viable. And at this point, he and his family are hoping they break even. They're hoping it's not a loss. All they can basically do is watch and wait at this point. At the same time, a lot of other losses here in Minnesota, we've learned, are more immediate. I also want to show you video of a staggering scene that we saw today in nearby Winona, Minnesota. That is a once hay barn that is now basically burned rubble. This barn is one of 6 that local firefighters say has gone up in flames in the last month. 5 of those 6, they say, are from hay spontaneously combusting. It is so hot that hay is just randomly catching fire. And 5 in the last month, they say that's more than they usually see in an entire year. That's how bad things have gotten here in the Midwest as this severe heat wave, again, continues to barrel east. Gadi, I'll send it back to you.
Midwest sign of the times there. Thanks so much, Maggie. And coming up, the Department of Education is looking into Harvard's admissions process, specifically if the university has given special treatment to family of alumni. But first, you gotta see this. 93-year-old Everett Callan just became the oldest person to hike Yosemite's Half Dome here in California. And no matter how old you are, this is a crazy hard hike, even for experts. He did it alongside his son and his granddaughter there, and it took him about 13 hours to get to the summit. And get this, he came up with that idea after going skydiving a few years back. Everett, I so badly want to be you when I grow up. We'll be right back. Hey there, welcome back. Let's get you caught up in 30 seconds. Today, Congress heard a whole lot about unexplained phenomena, aka UFOs. Former military officials told lawmakers that the government knows a lot more about them than it's sharing with the American public, and it's time for disclosure. And Hunter Biden pled not guilty today to tax charges. The original plea deal for the president's son was surprisingly derailed because of immunity from future charges. And a court found Kevin Spacey not guilty of sexually assaulting 4 men in the UK. The actor teared up and thanked the jury. And the Department of Education is now investigating Harvard University over legacy admissions. It's been a big topic of conversation ever since the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action programs in college admissions last month. Now, legacy admissions are basically when students are given preferential treatment if their family member went to that school, and the NAACP says on top of that, it unfairly gives white applicants an advantage. The investigation started after a complaint was filed against Harvard earlier this month, and in it, advocacy groups argue that there's basically no educational justification for legacy admissions. NBC correspondent Antonia Hilton joins us now. Antonia, can you talk us through this? How big of a role are legacies playing at top universities?
Hey, Gadi, well, a massive and measurable role, actually. And that's been going on for decades in this country, not just at Harvard, although Harvard is at the center of all of this. In the complaint, these advocates, they actually cited Harvard's own data that became public as a result of the Supreme Court ruling, showing that about 70% of these connected students, these students who have family members who went to the school, that they're white, and that therefore, when they take hundreds of these spots, they are displacing students of color, students of lower or middle income backgrounds. And actually, another study that just came out a couple days ago found something very similar, that actually schools at the Ivy level, sort of Ivy plus level, so that includes schools that aren't technically Ivies, but are, in similar standing, that they are more than 2 times likely to choose a student of high income than of low and middle income background, even if they have the exact same SAT and ACT scores. And so this is all really coming to a head right now. And you can expect, as students are going to go back to campuses in the next couple weeks in mid to late August, that the conversation is only going to heat up because they're starting coalitions on campus. They're demanding meetings with administrators to say, okay, if affirmative action is off the table, this needs to be off the table as well, Gadi.
And Antonia, this affects Harvard students the most right now. What are they saying about what this could look like going forward?
There's a lot of frustration and disappointment among students right now because you have to keep in mind, while this is breaking news for us, the reality is students and university leaders have known that this result was coming for a long time because they had years to prepare. This lawsuit goes all the way back to 2014, and people were warning even then that it was going to wind its way up to the Supreme Court and that very likely judges in the center and on the right would move to overturn it. And so they've had all this time to come up with policies, a plan. And students say that Harvard and other schools similar to Harvard haven't done enough to reassure them that they're truly committed to diversity. Take a listen to a conversation that we had with one student on campus who's organizing around all of this.
Legacy students will always, be able to get in, right? But for us, we feel like now we have to do a lot more to even feel like we can even thrive on a campus like that, especially when it's only 1 or 2 of you in a classroom.
Harvard has told us that they're still reviewing all of their practices and that changes may come. But, if you're one of those people who's thinking, hey, these schools are hundreds of years old, they're not going to change anything, this is all tradition. Well, keep in mind, Wesleyan, a very good and competitive school in Connecticut, just did away with legacy admissions the other day. So the pressure from students, the pressure from advocates, it may well have an impact soon, Gadi.
Antonio, thanks so much. And when we come back, an apparent military coup in Niger, members of the president's own security were holding him hostage in his home. We've got a report from the capital city coming up next, so stay tuned. Hey there, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world in 80 seconds. More than 50 pilot whales are dead after a giant pod of them got stranded on a remote beach in Australia. Rescue teams are working hard to get about 40 whales back into deeper waters right now. Pilot whales are about 13 to 20 feet long, and they are a really tight-knit group. Experts say when one gets into a problem, the whole pod usually follows. And a large typhoon in the Philippines has killed at least 6 people, including a mom and her children who were buried under a landslide inside their home. Thousands of others have been left homeless because of heavy flooding and damaged houses, and the storm is expected to head towards Taiwan's southern coast tomorrow. And a pop star in Japan is making headlines today for publicly coming out as gay. J-pop star Shinjiro Ate made the announcement at a fan meetup in Tokyo today, saying he didn't want others to struggle with their identity the way he did. It's a rare move in a country like Japan that is quite conservative when it comes to same-sex relationships. And in Peru, a violent car crash was caught on camera that put 3 people in the ICU and hurt about 20 others. That's it right there. 2 vans and a rickshaw smashed into each other and barely avoided somebody that was walking by. As soon as it happened, people rushed in to check on everyone involved. No word yet on what caused that crash. And an apparent military coup is playing out right now in the West African country of Niger. Soldiers from the Presidential Guard say they are holding the country's president hostage inside his presidential palace. And there are reports that the country's borders have been closed and a curfew has been issued. NBC's Courtney Cuby has an exclusive look at what's exactly going on.
Tonight, chaos in the capital of Niger after what appears to be a coup attempt against President Mohamed Bazoum by his own security forces. The latest flashpoint for people here already facing threats from climate change and extremist groups.
Nearly everyone here in Niger lives below the poverty line. Millions of people don't have enough food. And the terrorists here know that. They often target these vulnerable populations, forcing them to either flee their homes or join their terror groups.
And then there are diseases like malaria. Last year, over half the children under 5 who died here were killed by the disease. And the stories are heartbreaking. We meet 26-year-old Adama at the small hut where she lives with her family. USAID staff there to provide free care. She's already lost 1 child and tells us she's getting her 2-year-old son, Abdul Arazak, malaria treatment because it kept him alive last year. But like most children here, Abdul still faces chronic malnutrition. Adding to all this, drought and soaring temperatures turning nearly 275,000 acres from farmland to desert every year. Extreme weather made even worse by climate change. And this humanitarian crisis knows no borders. In neighboring Benin, we meet Selina Kulikum, a mother of 5 who walked over an hour to get one of her daughters treated here. She tells us she wants to open a hair salon, but doesn't have enough money. And now she fears her daughter, Kusobe, may need surgery. We traveled here with American military personnel. Captain Stephanie Deriso is the first woman to lead a group of special operations troops focused on helping people here in Benin.
You have to show the people that you care about them and that you're here for them and that their government is here for them.
This 29-year-old Beninese army nurse says this outreach is working. The locals are no longer afraid of the military and they are our brothers and sisters now, she says, giving them an option other than joining terror groups who threaten them if they don't. Tonight, bringing together the military and civilians with the same goal.
It's helping provide much-needed resources to these populations in rural areas.
Meanwhile, tonight, the U.S. is calling on the Presidential Guard to release the president, who they are still detaining.
Courtney Cuby, thank you so much. Stay safe out there. Before we go, Team USA is getting ready to take on the Netherlands. We've got a report from the World Cup in New Zealand where the fans are absolutely fired up for the match. Hey, welcome back. And in just minutes, it is go time for the U.S. women's national soccer team at the World Cup in New Zealand. The team has been gearing up to go head-to-head with the Netherlands, a rematch of the 2019 World Cup final. And NBC's Molly Hunter is in New Zealand. She got a chance to talk to the team before tonight's big match. And here's what they had to say. Hey, Molly.
It is chilly here in Wellington. Now, we were told that Wellington was going to be a lot colder, a lot windier than Auckland. It is a southern city on the North Island, and it definitely is. So the U.S. team is having their first practice here in Wellington, a new facility, just getting used to the new facilities, the new field, everything. I'm just going to step out of the way so you can get a look actually at practice. They were just running kind of a lot closer to us, so we got a good look. Everyone's looking strong, really warming up in this cold temperature. They did also just hold a press conference. Rose Lavelle and Coach Vlatko Andonovski answered some questions. Take a quick listen to what they say about that Netherlands game.
I think we know every time we play Netherlands, it's going to be a great game. They have a lot of experience on the field, and I think it's going to be fun.
We've trained, prepared a lot for this tournament, and especially for this game, and excited and looking forward to it.
Now, Rose Lavelle, of course, played a huge role in the 2019 World Cup win against the Netherlands. She was asked kind of if she felt different. Her answer is pretty fun. Take a listen.
I think I would have expected a moment like that to feel like I'm different or change me, but I don't really feel like it did. I feel like it was a goal and it was fun, but I don't know. I feel like I'm still just me.
I mean, if I could end on that is maybe Rose's life changed, but she hasn't changed a bit. So she's still same humble and great person.
Thanks.
Now, Coach Andonovski was very clear that this was really not kind of a huge rematch. He joked that he wished it was actually the final because it meant that, of course, they'd gotten to the final. But he said this is just a really important game against a very tough opponent. Again, the U.S. Faces off against the Netherlands. That is Wednesday night on the East Coast. That is Thursday daytime. And you got to hope, look, it is a little bit warmer when the sun comes out, but you got to hope for a few more degrees for these girls playing out here in these very cold temperatures. I'll send it back to you.
Winter on the pitch out there in New Zealand. Molly Hunter, thanks so much. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.